Welcome to Gardening Australia. We've been carefully cultivating some absolute pearl of stories for you this week, and I can't wait to show you what we've got lined up. Take a look. I get down to ground level with glorious grevilleas.
I'm creating a pond complete with diverse plants, rocks and logs to entice frogs into my garden. It'll have almost everything they need, and I'm sure they won't be able to resist.
It's a great time to plant winter veg, and whilst old favourites are always welcome in our kitchen, it's also an opportunity to try something new.
And I'm visiting the home and workplace of an architecture practice which is re-examining how we view housing density and the role the garden plays.
The ability to place and curate colour is something that makes a great gardener. And some of the time, that artistic touch will outlast us. Sophie's in a beautiful garden, carrying on a touching memory.
Today I'm visiting Coinda, a garden which is the living vision of the late plantswoman Chris Scott, OAM. Chris was highly active in promoting gardens and gardening throughout the Adelaide region.
It's been very exciting for us all seeing it come together, and we hope that the community will inspire them to love gardening.
She was co-founder of the former Open Gardens Australia scheme and an active member of the Mount Lofty Botanic Garden Support Group. A pavilion at Mount Lofty Botanic Garden is named in her honour, as is a sculpture along the Adelaide Hills Sculpture Trail, which she also supported. Chris, who was a friend of mine, died 9 years ago. This garden is a love letter to her family and her husband Nigel, who keeps her memory alive by tending the garden that she loved. So when did you and Chris meet?
Oh, well, she'd just left school and I was just at the end of my first year at university. She couldn't start nursing because she wasn't quite 18. And we met at the dance and started from there. And within 3 or 4 months, we were pretty clear about what we were going to do with the rest of our lives. And my grandchildren, particularly my granddaughter, say, "What?"
So when did you buy this property and what was it like when you came here?
Well, in 2004, Chris wanted a much smaller house and a much bigger garden. So we were looking for somewhere where there was north-facing, plenty of water, and the capacity to have a big garden. And she spotted this place. There was nothing here. This was just paddock. It was a blank canvas. It had the old trees around, but everything that you can see from where we're sitting was not here. And it's all part of a plan that she had in her mind. And, you know, I want pin oaks along there, I want autumn colour over there, I want fruit trees here, and we need to have some formal gardens up front.
And did she write this plan down?
Of course not.
Looks amazing.
It's terrific, isn't it? The colours. Look at that yellow coming through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there'd always be something to look at.
There's always something to look at. There's always a reflection, no matter what's going on.
While the block is big, clever planting and landscaping makes it feel more intimate and enclosed. The slope is staggered by a series of dry stone retaining walls, and there is hedging and some clipped hedges to provide some structure. This is magnificent, Nigel.
It's wonderful, isn't it?
What do you think Chris would think of all this now?
But I think she'd be absolutely delighted because she was looking for colour and contrast and a bit of design and a wide range of plants, and it's all here. I think she'd be very, very, very pleased with it. I'm very proud of it. I think she did a fantastic job.
And this red stem dogwood is stunning, and they love wet feet, so it's very happy where it is.
It's having a wonderful time, and every year we cut it right back, and that's what we grow it for. The red colour is terrific. And from the other side, you'll see the reflection in the dam. It's terrific.
So for people that don't know it, it's a deciduous shrub, and when it drops its leaves, then you get to see how spectacular it is.
It's exactly right.
Now, what are the challenges with this property, Nigel?
I think you'll feel it under your feet already.
I can. It's very wet.
Water, moisture.
Too much,
too much in the wrong place. Through here, it hardly ever dries out properly, and this last year has been a real challenge through here. I can't mow through there, it's too wet. And the other problem it causes is things like these apples on our right here. They look like something the cat dragged in this year. It's just been so wet. It's made them look awful. I don't know whether they'll survive.
Wow. And any other trees that haven't liked it?
There's been quite a lot. The biggest loss is magnolias. I've lost at least a dozen of them.
And what did she want in the garden?
She wanted autumn colour. She wanted a lot of the things that you can't grow on the Adelaide Plains because it's too hot. So she wanted autumn colour. She wanted to be able to grow quite a lot of different exotic trees. And when I say exotic, that doesn't exclude Australian natives, but things that had horticultural interest.
So these upright crab apples are gorgeous.
They're terrific, aren't they? Lovely colour.
Amazing.
Great form. Yeah, they're terrific.
And I can see there's lots of fruit, and the fruit's actually quite a good size.
It's a good size, and it makes great crabapple jelly.
So that one's Malus trilobata.
Yes, indeed.
Now here, this beautiful ground cover grevillea.
It's terrific. It's best keeping weeds under control. It does a terrific job. And you can see that I have to prune it with a hedge clipper.
It's a great combination.
I think there are 5 or 6 plants along this whole length, that's all. Going like crazy. This one's got a really good colour, hasn't it?
It has, just stunning.
Oh, they're great.
So they're beautiful stone walls, Nigel.
They are, aren't they? We built them. Or to be more correct, Chris built them up house to the stones. Wow. My judgment for stone placement was not good enough.
Okay, they look fantastic. And here, I can see that beautiful avenue of clivias, which makes such a grand entrance with the trees either side.
They're golden clivias. We got them from Melbourne. We propagated them in Adelaide. We bought a lot up here, planted them all along the driveway, and they just love it.
Also, the plectranthus look
beautiful.
beautiful.
The plectranthus is wonderful because it's flowering now.
It is.
Yeah.
Tucked under the evergreens of the conifers, they're given frost protection, so it looks beautiful.
Yeah, it does really well, and that's great.
Gorgeous. Let's go exploring.
Yeah, we'll go down here, yeah.
Now, I can see you've got some of the beautiful species cyclamen.
Yes, lots of them here. One of Chris's favourite plants.
Amazing foliage and flowers.
Yes. She was a member of the Cyclamen Society in the UK, and she planted all this seed, and there's cyclamen all over the garden. They're such small, we don't really see them, but they pop up and suddenly, oh, there's a flower somewhere.
Chris obviously loved her Japanese maples.
Oh, yes, she did. And there's little groups of them planted all over the garden.
And you've got both the tree types and the standard weepers?
Both types, yes, all with colour.
And the dogwoods are amazing.
They're fantastic, but I do think the flowers are even better.
Oh, they are. They're magical. That red one's amazing.
That red one is astounding, isn't it?
The dam is surrounded by autumn colour. There are pin oaks on the eastern side, with many deciduous conifers at the northern end. On the western side is a large array of maples, cercis, oaks, nyssa, Chinese tallow, and liquid ambers. This garden was open a number of times for open gardens.
Only by me. She would never open it herself.
Okay.
Wasn't good enough.
Really?
Yeah.
So the garden was just open on Mother's Day. Tell me about that.
Well, Chris passed away Mother's Day 9 years ago. But I opened it for the first time last year because I could see that that was what she was actually trying to do. She never saw it, but that's what she was trying to do. And I thought, well, I'm pretty proud of that, so I'll open it. So we had an opening, and it was fantastic. Just under 1,000 people turned up. The colours were fantastic. There were just people everywhere, and they really liked the colours and also liked the whole design of the garden, because it's not just about colours, it's got a whole open feel to it. It's not formal, but it's... So it really worked well, and I didn't get any complaints.
So what does the garden mean to you, Nigel?
It's Chris. It was almost 60 years that we were together, from the time we met until the time she died. And as I say to a couple of my friends who's had similar losses, you get used to it, but you don't get over it. It means everything to me, I suppose. It's a memory of her.
Camellias tend to get a bad rap. They're known as water guzzlers. Well, I really disagree about that because in a pot or in the garden, if you tend a camellia just like you do any other plant, they don't need a lot of water. They'll do quite well without it, apart from on hot, windy, dry summer days when you must give them a bit of water as you do any other plant. Give them some mulch. Camellias are really tough.
How do you know if your cuttings have formed roots? Well, it is a magical thing. You can see these Muehlenbeckia cuttings are forming roots in water. It's a really simple technique for this plant, but others can be a bit more difficult. Some, things like roses, can actually shoot some new leaves from the nutrition in the stem before they form roots. So it's always good to look for roots at the bottom of the pot. You'll actually see them starting to protrude. But if you think they've been in long enough, they're looking healthy and that they've survived, you can always slide them out of the pot and have a closer look. It is the only way to know you've definitely got roots on your plant.
Why do some Australian native plants become rare? Well, the main reason is that the areas that they grow become developed or cleared. And it constricts the areas where these plants grow because a lot of them need specific conditions. Now, this beautiful brush cassia, Cassia marxiana, is a Bundjalung native and it grows in the coastal rainforest around the Queensland-New South Wales border. And because of those coastal areas being cleared, there are only about 100 of these known to be in the wild. But the good thing is they are available in nurseries and they are a beautiful plant to have in your garden.
Grevilleas are some of the most beautiful of all Aussie plants. The diversity of foliage, flowers and form is spectacular, from the towering southern silky oak, the Grevillea robusta, to those big, beautiful subtropical bloomers. And Grevillea flowers really are unique. What looks like one flower is actually a cluster of many individual flowers. Many Grevilleas are naturally low-growing and compact, having evolved as understory plants in forests or in low-growing heathland communities. These species and hybrid cultivars are often suited to smaller spaces and make great ground covers. Grevilleas provide so many benefits. On a sloping site like this, their roots stabilise the ground and they mat over the surface, which prevents any runoff. Of course, the matting also prevents any weeds from taking hold. And then from a temperature point of view, they cover the ground and it's cooling compared to a hard surface like this. Of course, they provide a lot of habitat for insects, birds and small marsupials to move around safely. And they're a wonderful invitation to bring the birds and the insects into your backyard. Now, most Grevillea ground covers love a sunny position and good drainage. If you've got a heavy soil, make sure you raise the bed that you're planting them in. I reckon there's a spot for a Grevillea ground cover in most gardens around the country. Keep an eye out for them. You may just find one under your feet.
Josh, there's one question I'd like to ask you. Is there a gardening trend that you'd be glad to see the back of?
Well, I've got a few actually, but there's one that really comes to mind, and that is that until recently it was a cultural norm in Perth to have lawn on your verge and to irrigate that. And the reality is, in the southwest of WA, we have a drying climate and water's super precious. So what we have seen is that most sensible people have stopped irrigating lawn on their verges, and in fact, many have started to convert those verges to native plantings, which looks great, it provides biodiversity and also creates a sense of place. But there's one trend that I really, really hate, and I would just love to see the end of, and that is the use of synthetic turf. Look, it's not turf at all. If you want some turf, and it does have value in the right place where it's used, then use real turf that actually cools the surface rather than getting hot like synthetic turf, which ends up as waste at the end of its life.
I've seen weeds germinate, seeds land in plastic turf, germinate and grow away. It is the hottest stuff underfoot. Like, I totally agree, Josh. The quicker that stuff can, well, let's say, no longer be manufactured, because if we pull it up, where does it go? I mean, it's the age-old problem. If you have a product that's not organic, there's no way to reuse that stuff, so, yeah.
And a final point on that, the idea of it being called water-wise is just not true. I've seen people out on their front verges with synthetic turf actually hosing it down to clean it. I mean, come on, let's get real.
Water is life, so it only makes sense that it's a key ingredient to attract wildlife to your garden. Hannah's been doing some digging to build some waterfront real estate for the locals at her place.
I've been busy adding a diverse range of plants in my garden to create more wildlife habitat for birds, insects and small mammals. Some way for them to shelter and provide them lots of food to eat. But did you know there's another aspect that really helps increase biodiversity? Water. And there is plenty of that around today. It's something that I really want to make a permanent feature in my place because there is one thing my garden is missing: frogs. Frogs are important because they're a good indicator of the overall health of an ecosystem. They're a food source for other wildlife, they help to control mozzies, and making a pond for them is one way to restore a bit of natural habitat to the urban landscape, which benefits a wide range of other animals like birds and insects. There's quite a few things to keep in mind when you're building a frog pond, including the location, size, materials and plants. And while it can seem a little bit overwhelming, it is totally doable. And I'm going to show you how, step by step. This pond is going to be pretty small, only around 1 square metre in its surface area. We've placed it up on this flat terrace high in our slope. Of course, you can pop a pond at the bottom of a slope, which is perfect for capturing more water. Just be mindful of potential excess nutrient runoff, which can result in algae growth, not so great for frogs. A partially sunny spot is ideal. In full sun, algae can become unmanageable and smaller ponds will heat up more quickly, and you don't want to cook the frogs. If you don't have much choice for sun position, then choose plants that will thrive in that spot and create shade. Mark out the shape, including the tiers. I've gone for a curved organic design, which feels a bit more natural. With the tiers, you can have as many as you like. I've just got 2, but the more you have, the more different spots for habitat you have for plants and animals. I'm working with some tough dolerite clay here, so I've got a long-handled spade and a crowbar. The sharper your tools are, the easier it'll be. Digging is hard work, but putting in the effort now will pay off with a nice, well-shaped pond, so don't give up. Before you can lay the pond liner, you have to put in a buffer layer to stop the liner getting punctured by rocks or sticks. This is where people usually use sand. Or you could use geotech liner. And now it's time for the pond liner. This stuff is UV stabilised and really safe for aquatic life. I've cut it quite large so it can overlap and sit underneath the surrounding rocks, and then I'll trim it down later on. I'm placing lots of rocks to hold the liner in place and help press it into shape. I'm loving how this border of rocks is already creating a beautiful space, and we haven't even got the water in yet. This next step is optional. I'm going to be adding some coarse sand and some large pebbles to create a more natural environment. The coarse sand won't cover all the liner, but it helps to highlight the different tiers.
It's ideal to fill your pond with rainwater, but you can still use tap water. Just be aware that it can take up to 1 week for all the chlorine to evaporate.
Check the pH regularly to ensure it's close to neutral. Test kits are different to those for soil, and pet shops should have them. Tap water quality can also vary depending on where you live. If you're unsure, do some research and test before use.
I've got a range of plants here, including some native milfoil, some sedges and some Vietnamese mint. These are all marginal plants, which means they thrive in shallow water, so I've tucked them along my top tier. I've also got some floating azolla. Before you use it, check to make sure it's not a weed in your area. Here it's really contained and controlled, so it's not a problem at all. What I haven't got here today is an oxygenating plant. So in the coming weeks, I'll be tracking down some native water ribbon. These plants are fully submerged and help provide oxygen to your pond. Around the edge of the pond, I've got a few things to plant, including some bromeliads. I'm really interested in planting these because apparently the frogs love hanging out inside the wells of the plant, where there's always some moisture present.
I'm keeping the bromeliads in their pots because they love a free draining soil mix, but I'm semi-burying them so they don't tip over. On the other side of the pond, I'm planting some pink yarrow, lemon balm and nasturtiums. Then I'm adding a layer of mulch to finish it all off. I love mulch because not only does it add nutrients, but it really does lift the look of the whole pond area.
For a finishing touch, I'm going to put this log into the pond to make sure frogs and any other animals can get in and out easily.
If you have young kids or pets around, then you really should include a barrier that prevents them from falling in.
It'll take a few days for the pond to clear, and then all I have to do is wait for the sound of frogs to tell me they've arrived. I can't wait.
For a lot of us, autumn is a time to change gear in the garden and shift what we're growing in the veggie patch. And if it's out with the old and in with the new, then why not experiment a little? Josh has you covered.
After a productive summer and autumn in our veggie patch, it's time for new crops to take us through winter and into spring. And a little thought ahead of planting will mean much better results. The reason I have multiple vegetable beds is that I can rotate different crops throughout the season to reduce the chance of pests and diseases, as opposed to planting the same crop in the same spot time and time again. And it can also be used to improve the management of soil fertility. For example, after a bumper crop of watermelons, which are heavy feeders, the nitrogen in the soil will have been depleted. So it makes sense to follow it up with legumes that will put nitrogen back into the soil. I'm going for snow peas this season, and I'm going to make the most of these frames that the watermelons rambled over to use them as trellises for the peas. So all I have to do is adjust the spacing, bring them in a little bit, just like this. So I'll be able to have a good row for the peas on either side, about 1/2 metre apart. I'm making a shallow trench along the base of the trellis and setting out the seed about 5 centimetres apart, and then backfilling. These seeds will germinate in about a week, and I'll be harvesting them in around 8 weeks. I'm also going to sow a legume crop into this bed, which had tomatoes and basil in it over the summer, but this time it's broad beans, and a variety called Cole's Early Dwarf. As the name suggests, it grows lower than most varieties, to about 1 metre, which means it's less likely to topple over when it's laden with pods. I like to plant broad beans in blocks of 3 to 4 rows. with the seeds about 30 centimetres apart. This helps the plants to self-support as they grow. It also helps with pollination, as the bees have plenty of flowers to work. As you can see, this bed was full of beans. Climbing beans on the poles and bush beans down below. We had beans coming out of our ears. Now I need to clean up the last of the spent crop, keeping the seeds for later, and then also preparing the soil so it's ready for what's coming next. Whilst the beans and the beneficial nitrogen-fixing bacteria on their roots will have added some nitrogen to the soil, the crops I have in mind will need extra goodness, including compost and pelletised manure. In case you haven't guessed already, I'm planting leafy green crops in this bed, which are super hungry plants. And I've got all my usual favourites: cabbage for making sauerkraut, baby bunting broccoli, which produces small heads over an extended period, and for something new, I've got endive. Endive has a bitter green leaf and is a member of the chicory genus. I'm planting out these seedlings around 40 centimetres apart, and along with the rest of the leafy crops in this bed, I'll give them a regular liquid feed of fish emulsion across the season to move them along. Endive doesn't like frost, so if you're wanting to grow these in a cooler corner of the country, wait until spring to plant them out. Now we're getting a little more exotic with our winter veg. Here are a couple that I haven't grown before. Let's just say they suffer from a bit of an image problem. They're not the most attractive vegetables. This one's celeriac, and it's grown for its bulbous root, which can be roasted or made into soups. And these are kohlrabi. There's two varieties, a white one and a purple one. They're grown for their swollen stem, which again can be roasted, made into creamy soups, or even shaved and eaten raw. I'm treating both these crops like root crops, even though strictly speaking they aren't. The aim is to encourage the celeriac to develop a swollen root, and the kohlrabi to develop a swollen tennis ball sized stem. I'll do this by limiting fertiliser that's high in nitrogen, like fish emulsion, to prevent excessive foliage growth. I'll also apply supplementary potassium in the form of potash to help with strong root development. I'm planting these seedlings around 40 centimetres apart, ensuring the root swelling of the celeriac and the stem of the kohlrabi are comfortably above ground level, as this is where the bulbous edible parts will develop. These ones are a bit crowded, so I'm thinning out the kohlrabi before planting, and I'll thin out the celeriac seedlings with scissors once they settle in. The celeriac will take around 16 weeks to mature. The kohlrabi will be ready in around 10 to 12 weeks. Don't leave it any longer, as it can get woody and hollow in the middle. Crop rotation can be a great way to make the most of the nutrients in your soil. By understanding what the plants need and incorporating legumes into your rotation, you'll use less fertiliser and get better results. And don't be shy about trying something new. I wonder what my family will think of these.
Still to come on Gardening Australia, Tammy turns up the lights. Clarence splits up with an old favourite. And we meet an expert in a Mother's Day classic. As our cities become denser, our gardens become more important than ever at providing much-needed green space. Jerry's found an architectural home that takes this responsibility very seriously.
I'm visiting a home in Samford Village, a picturesque enclave 30 minutes drive northwest of Brisbane's CBD. It's here that the award-winning Live-Work Share House and its productive garden sits. 5 years ago, Sonia Graham and her partner, architect Chris Bly, moved to this 600 square metre site and set about building a home and creating a garden that would reflect a new direction in Australian architecture.
We had been living on acreage. Our children were quite young, and when they hit the teenager years, we thought it'd be lovely to move into our local village and create a new home for our family. We have our architectural practice, so it was very exciting to test out lots of ideas that we have around housing flexibility, affordability, adaptability, sustainability, all of those things that we could test out in our Live Work Share house. So it was really a case study for us to explore those ideas.
So tell me about the house.
Well, this is our family home. We also have a granny flat here and our office. So we're very fortunate to have 2 street frontage.
Hence the name Live Work Share House.
Yes, exactly right.
Plans for the house show the architecture office entrance located on one street, while the granny flat is accessed on the opposite side. The family home is central to the design, with bedrooms on the upper level and living below.
We were very keen to push all the boundaries and explore lots of ideas around housing flexibility and adaptability. This is such an important current topic which needs to be looked at for our housing stock to make sure our houses are meeting the needs of people.
This is not a big block. You'd expect it to actually be quite dense, and yet the feel is totally different.
Yes, we're just over 600 square metres with about a 40% site cover. So we were really keen to make sure that there is also a lot of outdoor space to get that beautiful indoor-outdoor flow.
I love the way you saved the cyclone fencing and you used this mesh to create a lovely airy arbour.
We're just using very low-cost, everyday materials in a slightly different, more creative way, bending the pipe and adding a bit of mesh as a framework for growing plants over.
And this climbing frangipani, I bet that's a lovely, fragrant welcome to your place in summer.
Yes, it is so beautiful, and we're just at the tail end of our flowers.
That's the last one,
That's
just up there.
Yeah.
And this cardinal creeper's looking gorgeous.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful plant and it allows dappled light into our office.
It's a classic subtropical vine. It
Yes.
really is. A central pathway through all the structures allows for timber screens to open up to draw cooling cross breezes from the shaded garden space.
Yeah, so Jerry, what's interesting about this setup is I can walk from one street to the other street, right through the middle of our site without going inside.
Thank goodness, somebody's finally designed a house for a gardener.
Yes, that's right.
You could take a wheelbarrow through.
Absolutely, and I always do.
Many of the rooms open up to internal courtyards and light wells. It must be a brilliant place for growing houseplants.
Absolutely, they love the micro courtyards. It's a great little habitat for them. It has a beautiful light quality, and then you have the advantage of every room looks out into these little micro courtyards. It's great for cross ventilation, for bringing natural light in, connecting indoors with outdoors.
And you become a fan of Hoyas.
Yeah, I do love the Hoyas. They're not in flower at the moment, but they're absolutely spectacular. I've really enjoyed it, and the fragrance is amazing as well.
I see you've got your vegetable garden front and centre. Good on you.
Yes. We wanted to showcase our veggies, and so it's right in the centre of we call this our garden room. And I think the more that you're around your veggies, sitting to observe what's happening, the more productive your garden will become because you tend to look after it more.
And immediately, you cannot miss this marigold here. The fragrance is gorgeous.
It is so strong, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it is fantastic. We just grow what wants to grow here. In winter, we don't have a lot of sun. So a lot of these greens thrive. I mean, rocket's still doing really well, mustard greens are doing well, the sambung, the Okanara spinach, they're all thriving, and we get a beautiful dappled light as the sun tracks through the sky into the afternoon. So it constantly shifts and changes.
Nonetheless, it's still a success.
Yeah, it is quite lush, and we do get a lot of our food out of here, and the herbs and the greens, so it's great.
The lawn is also a study in diversity, with zoysia grass interplanted with dichondra, basket grass and sedum.
We don't spend a lot of time watering or doing much. We just put in the ground covers. We did originally have grass, but it was quite hard to keep that looking good. Now we just allow all these little ground covers to take over. So it becomes a little tapestry of different textures and different patterns within this little courtyard.
I love that word because that's exactly what you've got, a living tapestry.
Yes.
And in front of the office entrance, there's a thriving verge garden full of perennial food plants. So what prompted you to garden in public?
I do really love verge gardens. And we have a bit of a unique setting here because our road is blocked off. So this is all nature strip. It's very tempting to have a little bit of borrowed landscape. We have a lot more light out here. This is where we get our morning sun, and we've put mainly dwarf fruit trees. And we also have a fair bit of understory happening here. We've got other little veggies, herbs and flowers that we're into planting as well.
And I've just seen your pomegranate, and it's looking better than mine. I'm a bit jealous. And true to its ethos, the impact of gardening doesn't end at the property line. This area looks quite promising. What was it like when you got here?
This was full of weed trees with some remnant vegetation. We were lucky to have some existing trees, but we saw this as an amazing opportunity to do a bush regeneration project. So we decided land care was a good umbrella to work under. We started from there and got the community involved and have had a number of working bees where we've done weeding or planting, and it's been a lovely community local project.
This ties back to Sonia's intent to live in a village and give back to the community. So would this be the future that you see for housing and also for gardening?
Yeah, I really do hope that this could be a model where we look at housing flexibility, adaptability, and having the garden as a central feature of your house makes life so much more enjoyable.
It's easy to grow a special plant on a sunny windowsill, right? But what about the rest of the house? Natural light isn't always abundant and our plants can struggle. But who says you can't fake it? Here's Tammy.
Growing indoor plants is a great way to bring nature inside your home. But sometimes the natural flow of light isn't enough, and the last thing you want is your green friends to turn brown. That's where artificial lights can help. Common household light globes usually emit one colour more than the others, and depending on the type, at a lower intensity. So whilst plants may get some benefits from these light globes at home, it's best to invest in ones designed for plants. Grow lights are fun to experiment with, and they give you more options to growing plants indoors, including greenhouses and tents. There are lots of grow light products available now, with differences in colour, intensity and functions. I'll go through the key factors in choosing the right lights for your plants. It's easy to think that if you leave your lights on 24/7, this will maximise growth, which sounds good, but actually no, plants need sleep too. Night or darkness is important as plants have a sort of circadian rhythm. They need to stop all that busy work of photosynthesising and process all that energy. Some lights come with timers, or you can pick up a timer that plugs into your PowerPoint so you don't have to remember every day. Grow lights are not as intense as the sun, so they need to be left on for longer. Think about the day length, about 12 to 14 hours of light. And of course, the plant type matters. Indoor foliage plants need less than outdoor plants, especially flowers and fruit. Changing the amount of light can trigger some plants to flower. For example, begonias and African violets are likely to bloom when there's a longer day or light period than night period. The colour or composition is important. The visible light spectrum ranges from purple to red. Think of a rainbow. Plants have evolved to mostly absorb red and blue light, not so much green, which is reflected, and that's why plants appear green to us. Changes in colour composition, like the ratio of red to blue light, inform the plant of seasonal changes, which way and how much to grow, when to flower, and more. Red light promotes flowering, whereas blue light is great for stimulating the growth and development of shoots and leaves. Sunlight has a full spectrum of colours, so plants can get everything they need. White lights are full spectrum too, and can be used for any plant at any stage of their life. It's probably the easiest choice. It's best to leave a decent gap between the light source and the leaves to avoid burning the foliage. Check the instructions that come with your light, as this is dependent on the intensity, which is measured in lux. The higher it is, the more intense it is. A light meter, like an app on your phone, can help determine the lux of your lights if you're unsure. Low light plants need 200 to 1,000 lux. Plants requiring bright indirect light need 1,000 to 2,000 lux. And those needing very bright indirect light need 2,000 to 10,000 lux. Whether natural or artificial, plants grow towards a light. So it's a good idea to rotate your plants occasionally to maintain an even shape. But you can use this to your advantage if you want to grow plants flat against the wall. While sunlight is hard to reproduce, artificial grow lights are the next best thing to keeping your indoor plant haven looking its best.
And a chrysanthus flavus. It sounds a bit like a Harry Potter spell. It certainly hypnotises the local bird life with its magical colours. I'm talking, of course, about the Flavitus kangaroo paw. It's a tall variety standing about 2 metres and flowers between November and February, which means this is the time of year to take action to ensure next year's growth. Now, this fella has stopped flowering. So today, I'll be dividing the root ball and separating it into smaller plants. Now, this will not only encourage more vigorous growth, but it'll also give you options for replanting elsewhere in your garden. Flavitus is an ideal garden plant, especially if you live on the East Coast, where it's suited to the soils and humidity. Just a word of caution when handling kangaroo paw. The hairs on the flowering stems can cause an allergic reaction, so you may want to wear gloves. Now, the thing to remember about kangaroo paw is that once the flower has died, it won't continue to grow. New leaf growth is generated by the underground rhizome, so you'll need to prune or divide when the flowering is over. Taken all of the dead heads, all the flower heads out, taken most of the foliage back to near ground level, just to make it a little bit easier to manage. Taken the entire clump out. It's not one plant, it's a collection of plantlets, and each individual plantlet we can separate, put them into a pot, or put them in other places here in the garden. I'm dividing with a spade, but you could use a knife. Now, put a smaller cluster back into the original position. We've got some smaller clusters here that I can either repot or put elsewhere. I'll probably put a couple more in this little location here, but we can certainly pot them up, give them away to neighbours, or put them anywhere else around the garden that you desire. Kangaroo paw make great pot specimens. Use a good quality, free-draining potting mix. Add plenty of fertiliser and mulch in the growing season. And don't forget to water well. Doing the work on your kangaroo paw now means that come spring you'll be rewarded with brightly coloured flowers, hopefully for decades to come.
It's a special weekend coming up, a time to pause and show some love to the matriarchs in our lives. And what better way to do it than with a stone-cold classic of the cut flower world. Our next story is with a bona fide expert who knows more about them than just about anyone.
Just to look around now with all the colours and shapes and forms, just something about chrysanthemums. They're a classical flower, and that's all there is to it. Every morning, the first thing I do, as soon as it gets daylight basically, get out here and walk around amongst the bees and look at them and just, oh, look at that, looks nice, look at that, looks nice. My name is Ron Seaton. I live up in the hills out of Perth with my wife Lynn. I've been growing and showing flowers since I was a young boy, and it's just passion. But I've been in chrysanthemums and breeding chrysanthemums probably since about 1980, but before that I've bred so many other flowers. Gardening's been my life, and it still is. It's only been over the last few years since I was basically retired, I can really concentrate on the chrysanthemum side of it. And I was breeding some very good ones. And then my wife decided to put some photos on Facebook. Well, the demand was huge. And she had orders for 30 and 40 of a variety. I'm going, okay, slow down, you know, because this is too big. And then she goes and takes another lot of photos the next day, and it just goes on and on and on. Well, that's the trouble with Lynn. She loves the computer. Every day she comes up and takes another photo, and she puts it on Facebook. They can see it everywhere in the world. So she is a big part of it, and if she slows down, I'll slow down. I was born in Kalamunda. I've been here all my life. I had a sister, my sister Marge, older sister, and my younger sister Stella. She was born after the war. I remember growing up when my dad was away during the Second World War. He was over in Borneo in the Second World War. And when he come back, he had a passion for growing flowers, and he used to show carnations, and he used to win with them all the time. He used to breed them, and it's something you just follow along with Dad. Dad's your idol, you follow along with him. I started growing flowers as a young child. I won prizes as a young bloke in the Kalamunda show for the under 14. Later on in life, I put flowers in at the Kalamunda show against him, and I wrote a little note in the local paper, "The master is mastered by Master Ron." And he didn't talk to me for quite a while, but because I beat him, that turned me into growing chrysanthemums after that. I left school at 14. I got a job, and after work I'd go and take cuttings of different gardens and grow them. I grew a rose from seed. I went and bought myself what was called a brownie box camera just to take a photo of this rose. I was so proud of it when it flowered. So I've been involved in breeding since I was probably 14, 15 years old. So it's gone on and on and on from there. This area here, there's 900 seedlings in here, 300 in each bed, but everyone is different. These were two parents I used for breeding. One's a pink and one's a yellowy salmony colour. Now, when I crossed those two, I got the seed out of them. All these here all came out of the one cross. Now, these are in 6 wide, these wires, by 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. So there's 60 different seedlings in that area. Now, in amongst these, there's not many I'll keep in this little group, put it this way. They just don't come up any better than what the parents are. So there's 60 odd plants will go into the bin. And this is the way breeding is. You can get a good lot and get one good one out of it, and you think, oh, wacko, I've got it. Over the years, I've registered over 200 varieties. We registered them under the name of Seaton. Our singles are all known as Kelly's varieties. Our cascades are all known as Valley varieties. and our cut flowers are called falls varieties. This one is called Seaton's Galaxy. It's what's classed as a spider. This one here, it's won more champions throughout the world than I think anything I've ever bred, and I think more than any other chrysanthemum. There's a few others I've got. Seaton's Flirt, which is a pink deck. That was released back in about 1985, 86. That's won champions after champions throughout Australia. Seaton's J'adore, which is a lovely pastel pink with a green tinge in it, a deck. That has won the hearts of everyone throughout the world. The florist trade love it because it's such a delicate colour. And one just close by here is called Seaton's Ruby. It's an anemone, an orange anemone. That's absolutely loved throughout America. It's won champion after champion. Going back a few years ago, I started a program of growing striped ones. That was my aim. Anything with a fleck or a stripe. And this year, I think I've cracked it with quite a few seedlings which have got totally different colour combinations to what has been around before. So it's just colour. That's the main thing I'm looking for. Nothing in particular, just different colour. We have in Perth this year the Australian Championship of chrysanthemums. All different flowers have got different classifications as you exhibit them. Leaves get points, there's colour tone. Most thing is blemishes and colour clarity. You have to have a clear colour without any blemishes at all. In the spiders, you can have one little petal hook on it and it can down point you. But you just learn over the years what a good flower looks like. I just keep doing it and I'll keep doing it until I drop off the perch, I suppose.
You know what they say, there's no time like the present. It's your list of jobs for the weekend. Take your pick. Cool temperate gardeners, green manure crops sown in March should be cut to ground level and dug into the soil now. There's no better way to get your veggie patch pumping. Keep Jack Frost's fingers off foliage by covering sensitive plants with sheets, cardboard, plastic or shade cloth on evenings when frost is predicted, removing it in the morning. This Mother's Day, why not pack a picnic? Head to your favourite park or garden and spend some time enjoying Mother Nature's awesome autumn foliage display. Simply spectacular. In warm temperate gardens, prune apricots now as their leaves start to yellow and fall. Pruning these tasty treasures ahead of winter helps avoid gummosis, a damaging bacteria. Cyclamens are stunning plants, make great gifts and are so easy to care for. Keep them indoors in good light while flowering and pop them out under your favourite tree once flowering is done. Introduce some endive to your patch, a hardy cut-and-come-again leafy green with slightly bitter foliage. It's eaten raw or slightly braised. Sow seed into rich, free-draining soil and start harvesting in 10 weeks. In frost-free areas of the subtropics, take advantage of the warmer autumn conditions and plant cucurbits like button squash, cucumbers and zucchinis for quick, reliable crops. Tamarillos are ripening, but if picked too soon, they're sour and unpleasant to eat. Instead, collect them as they drop from the tree so you can eat them fresh, poached, or turn them into a chunky chutney. Need a gift idea for Mother's Day this Sunday? A natty planter or recycled basket filled with a mix of delicious healthy herbs like parsley, coriander, sorrel and viola is sure to impress. In the tropics, the heavy rains of summer have subsided, so it's time to get stuck into the garden. Clear beds of spent summer veg and dust soil with garden lime or gypsum if the soil is alkaline. While you're prepping beds, take time to check and repair your garden irrigation and drip systems. Flush lines, fix breaks and get them humming before the soil starts to dry out. pawpaw fruits are starting to develop, so protect them from pests with a poncho. Wrap geotextile around the fruit with a bow at the bottom. They'll still ripen well, but won't get eaten early. In arid gardens, plant up a patch that both mum and the beneficial insects will love. Add some marigolds, dill, nasturtiums and calendulas as colour and companions. Find space at your place and plant asparagus. They take both time and room, but they'll reward you with 20 years worth of spears. Sow seed or plant crowns in fertile, free-draining soil. Clover may be a lucky charm, but stay on top of it before it takes over your turf. Mowing high and giving lawns a feed of a high nitrogen fertiliser is generally enough to see it off. Make the most of Marvellous May and happy Mother's Day to all the wonderful mums out there. Let us know how you spend your weekend in the garden. Well, that's it for another week. But you and I both know it doesn't stop there. We've got plenty brewing for when we see you next time. Here's what's in store.
There's no better joy than picking homegrown fruit from your garden. And you don't need a 1/4 acre block or an orchard. I'm going to show you how to grow fruit in small spaces.
I'm off to meet some teenagers who are finding that while good first jobs may not grow on trees, an urban farm is certainly a good place to look for one.
And does using gravel and broken bits of terracotta in the bottom of a pot increase drainage? The answer might surprise you.